Yeah, man.
That's why they call it the Deep South, because everybody from there is deep.
Deep in their cousin.
We are live, by the way, now, guys. It's all yours, ZMO.
Yeah.
I'm going to do some invites.
Hey, kids.
Okay.
Hey, Randall.
How many people? How many people are?
I'm doing good.
Oh, hello, mic check.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, no.
Yeah, you're good.
I heard an echo.
Oh.
Okay, it's good now. It's gone.
My laptop mic does that. That's why I use push to talk.
Gotcha. Oh shit. Yeah, I messaged a few people.
Okay, awesome.
As well.
Yeah, including me.
Yes, I did.
Oh, you messaged people, huh? You didn't message me, but okay, yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, that's fine.
He knew you'd be here.
Yeah. I honestly, that was the whole rationality behind that.
What? You think I have nothing better to do?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I guess that would be accurate.
Put it on the tee and knock it out of the park.
I just got back from a long walk, and man, is it humid outside.
Yeah? How humid is it?
It's so humid that it was noticeable.
Your mama is so fat that she got type 2 diabetes and congestive heart failure.
Damn.
Yeah, dude. Rough out there.
Your mama is so fat that she has serious health problems.
Yeah. Your mama is so poor, she relies on government-funded Section 8 housing and food stamps.
Is that an example of fake news?
Yeah, well, we are live now, although not that many people are watching.
Oh, live on YouTube?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess maybe. Wait, I don't know. You're the captain.
Yeah, man. I'm gonna wait. I'll give it till 7:10. Let a few more people flow in here.
It might take a while if they see that I'm in here.
Just have your mic muted, and they'll be like, "Oh, okay, he's muted. He's not saying nothing." So there's a town in Alaska that's called Alaska. UN Alaska.
And it's opposite day every day.
St. Lawrence, Anchorage. So, Richard, what's your atheist? What's the YouTube channel like? Do y'all have discussions like this? Like, what other things y'all do there? Hello, Randall.
Hi there.
Oh, I was just asking about. I was asking about the atheist, the Canadian atheist channel that you sent me a link to. I was just wondering.
Oh, that was the Discord, so that you could promote your stuff there.
Yeah.
The Discord gets it's gradually developing into a nice community. But these things take time when you're out there Uber promoting, you know?
Right.
And promotion's not my strong point. I'm better at promoting other people's stuff than my own, I find.
Yeah.
But that goes with trying to build community in a good way. Maybe this will sound better. I'm trying to work on audio stuff. Yeah, I'm not in my usual office because my daughter's down there doing piano, so I have to be somewhere else for this. I hope my audio is coming through okay.
Yeah, we hear you loud and clear.
Oh, good. Okay. So, what happens is a lot of these different YouTube channels that are mostly run by atheists that I'm involved in, and just joining in the conversation sometimes. They cover all sorts of different topics. Religion is not an uncommon topic. Human rights comes up, things like that, what's going on in the world. Typically, there's a lot of general interest as well. But definitely the topics that are related to atheism activism come up a fair bit as well. And then you've got quacks like Jordan Peterson out there who claim all atheists are Christians and don't know it, and claim we'll all be murdering people if we're true atheists and stuff like that. That comes up a fair bit as well. People like him, not just him, but others as well, who make ridiculous claims like that. So because these are the kinds of things that are concerns to atheists. So those kind of things that come up, especially in the U.S., there's a lot of pushback against the religious impositions on society and stuff. Those kind of topics are kind of popular as well. And very often things do kind of veer into politics, and that's where I usually kind of try to tune out because I don't want to get into politics too much, because I find politics doesn't usually make people feel very happy. The other topics have much better potential.
Well, you're gonna really like this conversation.
Well, I won't be able to stay around long because I'm going to have to go soon, but because I have to get my daughter to a ballet class, and then I've got some other things I have to take care of just before that. But I should be okay for a little while here anyway.
Is anybody else hearing background noise?
No, yes. I'm not. Let's see if it's from me.
I was hearing it when I was talking. Seems to be gone now. Oh, I thought it was me. Okay.
That's how they found out about the Big Bang, is background noise.
That's how they found out the Big Bang was background noise, yeah.
Or at least that's what I heard. I don't know if that's accurate.
What about now?
Oh, much better. I'm not hearing background noise when I talk now.
Okay.
Oh, it just came back a little bit there. I think if you just mute your mic when you're not talking, that might help. I use a push-to-talk function, so I have to pull the key down while I'm talking.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on my bed, and I have the covers pushed up in front of me, and my phone precariously balanced on those sheets. So.
Oh, you're a pro. Okay.
Because I'm reliability
of internet.
You got it set up like a pro.
Yeah, dude, for sure.
ZMO, how many times have you had people tell you you sound like Matthew McConaughey?
Oh, I've never had that.
Well, I'll be the first.
I can kind of hear it. Yeah.
Thank you, I guess.
Well, yeah, the audio is probably bouncing off that solid wall behind you.
Well, I've never had this problem before. I don't know. Maybe it's because the phone is in the sheets or some shit.
Yo.
That's what up, Dan?
So let's see. It's still echoing, but that's just, I guess, par for the course. It's not too bad. Yeah, and so I've been part of a show that's been in the planning for a little while. Every fortnight, that's every 2 weeks, we're doing a show where we have an open stage that people come on and challenge us to convince us that deity exists.
Yeah.
And the first one, just over 2 weeks ago, was about 4.5 hours, and then just on Sunday, a few days ago, it was just over 7 hours long. It's a good panel. We've got a bunch of people who are pretty easygoing, and so we don't end up with a bunch of fighting. Although we had one guy call in, and oh, hey, the echo's all cleared up now. This is great. So one guy called in on the first episode and said that everybody has parasitic worms in their stomach area that control the brain, and that proves God. And then the second episode he was on, he claimed everyone's got toxoplasmosis gondii, which comes from cats, and that's what's controlling us, and that proves God. So we have a few strange calls like that, which are kind of a lot of fun.
I'm not sure how accurate that is.
Yeah, we all had doubts.
All right, can you maybe repeat what's the like the nature of this show, or this what is it, a call-in?
No, it's not. Oh, you're talking about
What he's referring to, like this long conversation with interesting takes on God and cat parasites. Is it just like a free-for-all open conversation, or is there like a focal point? You said, and that proves there's a God. Is it
Yeah.
is it focused
So
on that?
yeah, you're asking me, obviously. So what the topic is that there's is to convince us, that the panel, that a god or goddess exists. And we actually had one person try to prove a goddess is real and Mother Nature is the goddess, and there's a whole worship component to that. So it's quite interesting. But I've been live streaming that on my YouTube channel, so I can post a link to the most recent episode in the live text chat. Then you can take a look at it if you like. I've got chapters all set up in there, so you can skip ahead to whichever one you find interesting if you don't want to watch the whole thing.
Do you conduct those conversations via this Discord, or do you have a different method?
It's on a Discord called Politics that has a really large audience, and so we the person who organized it brought me into it, and with a bunch of others. So there's 7 of us right now on the panel, and all together, and so it just gets hosted on there.
How does one find this Discord, or is it invite only? How's that work?
Oh, it's the Politics Discord. There's a link to it in the. I'm just going to send you the video. It'll have. You can read the description. It'll have a link to that there.
well. All right, I reckon it's almost 12:15. I guess I'll go ahead and start the show.
I just put the link in the live text for you.
Y'all getting any feedback from my mic at the moment?
Not when you're talking.
Not when I'm talking, just when I'm quiet.
When other people are talking, if you don't mute, then we get it. But otherwise, you're fine.
Okay. All right. Well, hello, friends, ladies and gentlemen, friends and comrades. Welcome to the ZMO show. Thanks to Travis Pangburn and the Pangburn Discord for allowing me this time slot. Today, I want to talk about what I've chose to give my little pet name, the media reliability crisis. Now, I think anybody that's paid any attention to our political world within the past, 5 years certainly has seen a steady incline of risque and potentially dangerous behavior by journalistic outlets, news outlets. It's bled over into talk shows. Podcasts now make up a big source of people's information. And yeah, I mean, we hear buzzwords about narratives and gatekeeping and mainstream media, corporate media. If you can, learning how to properly read the news, fake news, all this stuff, right? So that's generally what this discussion is going to be about. First, I want to just talk about the general reasons for why we have a press and why it's important. I think probably everybody knows this, but I just want to run over the basics. It's essentially for 2 reasons. It's one, at least in our system in the United States, in the States, it's to prevent government from getting away with things. It's to keep and inform. These 2 reasons actually go together with each other. It's to keep an informed populace, which is essential for a democracy to function, and to expose possible, law breaking amongst the government officials, or scandals, or whistleblowing, or what have you, right? Among other things. But I'd say those are the two main reasons that we have it. Let's see here. Oh, shit. So that's the reason why we have free media and press, and I think we can all agree that it's incredibly important. Now, the media nowadays is a lot different than it was in the 50s and the 60s. I think if you asked a 50-year-old or a 60-year-old, or excuse me, if you asked someone 50 or 60 years ago, where do you choose to get your news from? It would probably sound like a stupid question. They would probably be like, well, from the 3 news channels and the 3 magazines and the 1 or 2, main newspapers that cover, news all around the United States. But nowadays, I mean, we have a total decentralization of information. I mean, back then the news was about 30 minutes long. Walter Cronkite, he was famously voted America's most trusted man 2 different times, I believe, in 2 different decades. And I believe when he was asked about Nixon and his particular opinion on Nixon and his scandal, the Watergate scandal, he gave his classic answer, and honestly the answer I think most journalists should default to, which is, me as a newscaster, I don't have a right to say my opinion. I'm just here to give you objective news, as close as we can come to objective news, right? So, but with this thread in mind, and Walter Cronkite and the world news, a bunch of controversies slowly arose. Iran Contra, Watergate, as mentioned. I'm sure there's plenty others, right? But those are some big ones. And it basically showed that, because we already knew in authoritarian countries that, the media is going to spew lies, spew propaganda. It's controlled by the state. And I think people were in a bit of a naive state that they thought in a liberal democracy, by and large, the news is, fair and balanced. It is not going to mislead us, which we found to be completely incorrect, right? So come about 1980, I don't know the exact date, but we're all familiar with it because it's a everyday reality now. We have the CNN 24-hour news cycle. I believe CNN was the first to start the 24 hours news cycle. So, yeah, the 24-hour news cycle is a complete game changer. I mean, the 24-hour news cycle basically artificially makes journalists have to constantly update their story, right? Even if there's not new news to report on. I mean, and in more chaotic events like 9/11, for example, if you watch the old footage, there was tons of false reporting that day. I mean, I watched the video where Howard Stern was talking about it, and they were, there was a report in, a bomb's been found at the Capitol, a report in, a plane crashed into the White House, and I think that one's an exaggeration, but there were tons of wrong news reporting, and I think that speaks to the 24-hour news cycle. Even though this wasn't an incident of the 24-hour news cycle, because it was happening all at once at that time, but still, it speaks to the how the media has kind of been trained, like Pavlov's dogs, to constantly have a scoop, constantly have an opinion about everything, even if they don't know what they're talking about. Or and it also points to, in more chaotic times, I think it's best to not just continuously watch the news, right? Because in more chaotic things like a terrorist attack, you're much likely to get false information, information that didn't have the opportunity to be verified, right? But anyways, yeah, that we can go to, I think 9/11 was a big change in the news media. I think there's a lot of evidence that Fox News and Robert Ailes kind of ramped up some of their messaging towards their perceived constituents about liberals, but we'll get into that later. But fast forward to now, or fast forward a little bit later, and here comes the internet. We have a large decentralization of information, and the internet, for the first time, as being demonstrated, has allowed just pretty much any and everybody. I mean, a cage fighting fight caller / comedian to call out huge consequential lies that the government's been telling us. Just anybody and everybody can have an opinion. Everybody can have a some podcast and have something to say, and it's really undermined the mainstream media's narratives, and it's really undermined people's trust in the mainstream. And I'm sure there's some good parts to that, and I'm sure there's some bad parts to that. But the main issue I just want to address here, and then I'm gonna open it up, and I want to ask people. I want to ask each of y'all individual questions, and if you don't have an answer to the question, you could just talk about whatever you want or correct something I said wrong. But the general thrust is that the breakdown in the trust of media and thus the increased polarization, I believe, is really, and the fact that you really can't, or you feel like you can't go to a news source and get 100% of the story, 100% or objectively as we can, without spin. It's almost nowadays, a story happens, you have to hop over to CNN, and you have to hop over to Fox and MSNBC, and you kind of have to do this amalgamation and calculus in your head and say it's somewhere in the middle, right? Or you have to do the fact checking on your own. And it's really time consuming, it's really cumbersome, and it makes us very prone to misinformation, disinformation. And yeah, I think this kind of goes into what we were talking about last night with cancel culture, a little bit, not necessarily with cancel culture, but just the fact that we're now disagreeing on the actual facts. Before we would have the facts and then disagree about those. Now we're disagreeing on the actual facts, right? So I think media literacy is something we could bring up in this conversation. That's my general opening spiel. So I'm going to go around the room, and first off, I'll open the floor. Does anybody have something they want to say on the topic of, the misinformation in the media and the state of the media today as we see it?
I personally don't like it. That's my take.
What don't you like about it, Andy?
I don't like how it's unreliable and feels a little bit too complicated to find out what the truth is.
Right. So, all right, Andy, I'll ask you the first question. Let me get you a good one here. Do you think people are hungry for objective news, or do you think people like the spin?
I mean, it depends. Some people want the truth regardless of what it is, and other people just have confirmation bias, and they want what they want to be true to be confirmed for them. So that's why they stick with more biased news, and they might not even be doing that consciously.
Right. So, in the realm of psychology, do you think? What did you just say? What bias did you say?
Confirmation bias.
Yeah. Do you think what other psychological biases or effects or things we know in the realm of psychology? what's another one of those that you see that the media hacks or takes advantage of?
Is there any way Andy can like reconnect and disconnect? Because I can't hear a word of what he's saying.
Yeah, hold on. Can you hear me? Testing.
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Can you hear me,
There we
Don?
go. I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
All right. I don't know about a specific name, like what I would call this, but media definitely can get people potentially really worked up and emotional, and sort of take advantage of their more emotional viewers and scare people into thinking things are worse than they are. And so that way a certain demographic like that would be glued to the TV, always watching this, this 24-hour coverage of absolute hell. And a lot of it's exaggerated bullcrap. So they fearmonger, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. Fear mongering, right? A good phrase I like to use is amygdala hijack. The amygdala is a part of the brain that, among other things, controls our fight or flight response and our anger response. So an amygdala hijack is something that artificially hijacks your brain and gets you worked up, right? And I think this is something we see new in the news media. It's the other side isn't just, and it's something that's relatively new. It's that the other side isn't just wrong. They're evil and wrong, right?
So one thing I would add on this, Andy brought up the psychology of sorts, is that phrase cognitive dissonance, right? When someone is forced to face their own, the reality that they were wrong, people will go to great lengths to avoid that because of what it does. It scrambles up their brain and their entire worldview depending on the topic. And so that's, part of why we seek the things that are already going to satisfy what we believe, because the alternative, the cognitive dissonance that results, is too much for people to face. And it's a pride thing as well. When you catch someone in an argument and the moment that they realize they're wrong and you can see a small part of their soul die, no one wants to be that. And so we just kind of pile on with our tribe of, our echo chamber of groupthink, and it becomes, impenetrable, and we're saved from any opposing ideology by the repertoire of what we have behind us. So.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I was listening to a podcast last night. It's called Time Suck by Dan Cummings, if anybody's ever listened to it. He's a comedian, but he was talking about cognitive dissonance, and he was talking about this thing in psychology they call the backfire. I think they call it the backfire effect. No. The backfire effect and the double down effect. Basically, they did a test where initially the participants were given news clippings or something that, this was back when the Iraq War was starting. They were given information that Saddam Hussein had WMDs. And then they were asked a question whether or not they believed he had them. And then most of them answered yes, right? And then they were given concrete information about the fact that he didn't have them. There was no WMDs. This is a total lie. And actually, they found that they believed it more when they got their preconceived notions challenged. So it's a backfire effect. And like you were saying, people dig themselves into this hole which further destabilizes their cognitive, their cognitive dissonance, right? So, yeah, that's an interesting point. Lebowski, I'm going to move to you. Are you there, brother? Oh, I was going to ask him.
Sorry, I'm just at work right now. I'm finished here in a bit.
All right, man. It's all good. Bombay, then this is going to go to you.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're not in the States, so I need to pick a... Well, let me just ask you this. Where do you live? Let me ask you that.
Live in the United Kingdom, England,
Okay.
London.
Okay. Do you, with your experiences with American media and people talking about American media, American news channels, podcasts, whatever you want to call it, do you see a big difference in how our media works compared to how your media over there works? Or is it about the same?
I think it's about the same. I don't think it's misinformation. I'm more into disinformation. I think in America and in the UK, the media is being used to deliberately spread disinformation, to plant the wrong information out there. I know in your country, we're going back to the 1975 church committees. It got revealed that the CIA had something called Operation Mockingbird, where they were using the news, and they had journalists there that would feed out particular information to the public in America to spread disinformation and that was back in 75. That got revealed in the church committee meetings. They had Operation Mockingbird. So I think the same thing kind of still goes on, not just in America, but in the UK. I think the government has certain journalists, people within the media who are there to push out a particular narrative, and they're very skilled at it, and people lap it up, and I believe that helps to contribute to the confusion that people have. So sure, I mean, I would agree with part of what you were saying with the cognitive dissonance, but I do believe that people are being pushed in that way by the government through them having various journalists and people within the media who are tied with intelligence agencies. That's what I believe.
Fair enough. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. Do you think since you brought up Mockingbird, do you think the media was always as crooked as they are now? Or do you think now they're more crooked? Or do you think, like I said before, it's just the same, and that because we have cell phones and the internet, we can just expose them more? What do you think about that?
I think it was always crooked because it's a business. So it wasn't necessarily about the truth. It was always about profit. But I think there was a time probably when the government didn't have as much control over the media as it does now. So there was a time when they were almost like, do you guys use the term carpetbaggers, or I don't know, individuals who had not carpetbaggers. I'm trying to look like during the West, you had all those companies going out there to build the railways and stuff. They were individualistic. There wasn't that much regulation by the government to control them. I think that the media was like that.
Lebowski would call them robber barons, right? Like Rockefeller and Ford.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Baron.
Or like the movie Citizen Kane, the guy, it's supposed to be based on Randolph Hearst. And I think there was a time when a lot of those guys had a lot of autonomy and a lot of power, and the government didn't really look into controlling them. But I think later on, maybe the government then got their hands into them, and so the government is able to use them as a tool. So I think there was one time when they did have the freedom to be passionate about pushing out the truth, even though they were a business. But I think later on they were then controlled. So it's not necessarily about the truth. It's about putting information there for the benefit of the people, as the government would con you into thinking. That's what I think, anyway.
Fair enough. Appreciate that, Bombay. Doolittle, how you doing?
I'm doing good. If there's too much background noise, let me know because I'm sitting in a noisy restaurant. But I think Dr. Bombay is totally wrong. He's 100% wrong about his opinion that there's something new and recent about this.
Okay. Elaborate.
The printing press has always been controlled by people who are in the business of trying to control your mind. It goes all the way back to at least Gutenberg with the first book that was ever published. And that's my opinion.
The Bible,
I
right?
do.
So, Doolittle, I wanna ask you this question. How does the concepts? Do I want to ask you that question? I'll save that for Dan. Who do you, if you had to name a top 3 of the biggest offenders of misinformation or hysterical journalistic practices or unethical journalistic practices, if you had a top 3, who would they be? This is talk shows, podcasts, mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC. Who's your top 3 biggest, most problematic people?
Well, I mean, they're kind of the same. And they're all in the same boat. They're all trying to push an agenda. Like I can't say that I've seen one that's honestly just trying to inform you about something that matters to let you make your own decision.
Well, would you not concede that CNN is more fair and balanced than MSNBC?
I think those are
Sorry, can
equally
you
as
say that
bad.
again?
Okay, they're equally as bad. All right. I mean, I think for all that CNN gets shit for, yeah, I think MSNBC is obviously more committed to just saying whatever makes their party look good and whatever they can blame the other party for. Not that CNN doesn't do that. I just think MSNBC is much more blatant about it. All right, Dan, you there, my brother?
Yes, I am, but I have terrible hiccups.
Perfect timing. Yeah. Do you? Yeah. You know what my grandmother always told me? It always worked for me. You take a handkerchief or a piece of cloth and you put it over a glass of water and you drink it, and it worked like 19 times out of 20, man, for real.
I'll have to try that if I get home. I'm still driving back from the gym.
Can you answer a question?
Absolutely.
All
I
right.
don't.
What was I gonna ask you? What was I gonna ask you?
No, I already said hi.
Do you think, all things considered, that the mainstream media narrative is still more truthful word for word than alternative media?
So by mainstream media, we're talking about like
we're talking about
newspapers, or we're talking about like CNN, NBC, Fox, stuff like that.
Both MSNBC, I mean CNN, ABC, Fox, not Fox News. Yeah, the New York Times, the Washington Post, that type of stuff.
Generally, I would say that if you watch mainstream media, you're better informed, you're more well-roundedly informed.
Right.
Than if you watch alternative media. And the reason I say this is because alternative media is usually beholden to social media platforms and the algorithm. If we want to talk about amygdala hacking, I would say alternative media really needs to hack your amygdala to get views, where these networks don't need to as much. They still do, but not as much.
Fair enough. I'm going to ask you this other one. Does the media, by and large, and I feel like we're going to have to have a discussion about this word, the media, but it's a wide umbrella term like sports or religion or but just does the media, by and large, use misinformation knowing it's incorrect, or do you think perverse incentives create it, like the 24-hour news cycle, etc.?
So I would say that in recent light, in the last 4 years, I would say media has purposefully used misinformation. Case in point would be Easy Fox News have been terrible about what's going on. But I think if we look back for the last 50 years, you look at writings like Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent, it's clear as day that media has been used as that. For me, tyranny is exerted through the media in democratic systems. Noam Chomsky's whole idea about manufacturing consent is that private interests and government interests use media to manufacture their consent, like the consent around Iraq, right? Lying about WMDs. That was all manufactured. Like, if the media did its job, that would have never happened, but it didn't. So, yes, absolutely, the media knowingly and unknowingly spreads misinformation and disinformation.
And do you think that if 9/11 happened today, so to speak, with our technology and our ability to, me and you, we can research stuff, watch other people's things. Do you think it would have gone the same way because of the decentralization of information that we currently have?
I think if 9/11 happened today, half the country would say that it was Fox News gave money to the bombers, and the other one would say that it's Hillary Clinton did it with her emails. Like, I don't know, it'd be crazy. I have no idea. I definitely wouldn't have gone down the way it went down in 2001. But yeah, I don't think it would have happened the exact same way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm under the opinion personally that it would have been a lot different. It would have been tons of people questioning the narrative, just like you've seen people do with COVID, for good or for bad, just like you've seen people do with pretty much anything. I mean, we know about stuff we never would have known about. Hunter Biden's laptop, that's never getting covered in the 90s. You know what I mean? Well, maybe that's not true. Maybe that's a little bit of a bad example, but I think the point's still illustrated. I just want to read, if y'all are familiar or not with Matt Taibbi, he's an excellent journalist. He's one of the few, in my opinion, true blue journalists left that has at least has a presence. He's been on Rogan. He's been on other shows. He has his own podcast. I think it's called Useful Idiots, but he has a quote. It says, "The flaw in the system is that even the biggest news companies operate under the assumption that half their potential audience isn't listening." Right? So you turn on MSNBC, what are they telling? What are they telling you? They're telling you what they think an MSNBC person wants to hear. Conversely, Fox News, they're doing the same thing, right? You turn on certain podcasts run by whoever, and they're going to do the same thing, right? So I think this kind of brings me to the concept of narrowcasting and broadcasting. So as I alluded to earlier, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, the term broadcasting actually comes from the idea that it's a broadcast. It's broad, and your family, your uncle, your mother, your dad, who might have conflicting political opinions, are all going to take in this news, right? But and so it was tailored as such, and people try to be as objective as possible. And I'm sure Noam Chomsky would disagree in certain instances, but nevertheless, the point still stands. But nowadays we have narrowcasting, which if you are fascinated by the NFL's blackballing of what was the name of that quarterback? Shit. Colin Kaepernick. Yeah. If you're super interested in that story, you could probably find a podcast that has a 2-hour-long episode directly devoted to that, right? So, yeah, again, this broadcast and this narrowcast idea, I think it's pretty salient in today's times. Dow, what's up, Dow? How you doing? I'm going to ask you a question, brother. You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Where do you get your news from?
All over the place. I read a bunch of articles, a lot of different YouTube personalities. I tend to drift over mainstream news outlets as well, from CNN to Fox News, and I just kind of look at what they all say the same, and so you know that that's most likely true, and then I try to work backwards from there, I guess.
Do you think the distrust in the media nowadays is justified?
Honestly, yeah. Like it seems to me like the news industry tends to follow what they think people want, and they try to report things. They a lot of what it is they'll hire people to have a similar political disposition all the way through the company, which I think naturally leads to echo chambers. So that's what we're creating.
Yeah, sounds good. One more question. I think you touched on it a little bit with what you just said, but when you view all these different sources, how do you make sense of it? Do you kind of look for the middle road? I heard you said you're looking for things that are similar, so obviously they must all be true. Do you just do the calculus in your head and figure out from there?
It's generally like I feel as I go, and I kind of follow my intuition, but I just don't accept anything as absolutely true, and I remain open to a news source. But I try to take an average, and I have sources I trust more than another. So like if SciTech Daily releases an article about China's new fusion generator, and Fox News releases a different article that paints it in a different light, I'm more likely to listen to a more science-based source. But I do, like, political opinions are just as much a part of the landscape as the actual facts themselves. So I try to listen to it all, and then not really throw out where it conflicts, but definitely keep an open mind as to what the actuality of the situation might be as compared to people's interpretations of it.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point about political opinion pieces. Like, I don't have any problem with opinion pieces, right? As long as it's stated that it's an opinion piece. And for people who don't know this, Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson, when they were taken to court, their lawyers effectively argued that, hey, nobody who watches this should be under the impression that this is a news show. This is an opinion show. And that's how they justify saying things that are untrue, giving misleading statements, lying by omission, etc. Right? So I think that's an important point. I think it's Grim, right? You there, Grim? Going once, going twice.
Yeah, sorry, man. I'm on the phone. You can go ahead and pass. Listen.
Okay. Well, hell, Travis, I can't ask you a question, can I? Nah, you can't. You got to stay off your own medium, right? Well, I'll ask this question to the room then. Do y'all see a bleed over between? Internet culture and mainstream media culture? In other words, the like clip culture, where they'll take a clip out of context. Meme culture, which I see memes as like on the internet very often. Somebody can respond to a logical argument with a meme that's like catchy and funny, but and win the argument. But if you really look, like they just said a meme, like it's not logically consistent, but they can win based on that, right? Because it's so prevalent in people's minds, or however you want to explain it. But I see a lot of bleed over is what I'm getting at. Clip culture, meme culture, quote mining culture, clickbait culture. I think that's the big one, clickbait culture. Do y'all see a resemblance between internet clickbait, like on YouTube videos, and news broadcasts, or how opinion pieces are titled in newspapers as clickbait without the clicks, obviously? Y'all think that's what do y'all think about that?
Yeah, I think there's some similarity. Like when news tries to use a really sensational headline.
I think
one
they're
of the things you
copying
see
off
a lot
each other.
is,
They're copying off each other. Originally, the original newspaper organizations, they had their tactics with the headlines to get people's attentions, which could be misleading. And I think what happened with internet technology, people then took that a step further with what you said, clickbait. And then the news media corporations then had to play catch up because they saw this clickbait thing, the subculture, how popular it was. So they've now incorporated it into their style in so they're both copying, both cultures are now copying from each other in a way to try and gain people's attention. That's what I think, what I've noticed.
If you go to Ben Shapiro's YouTube, it's kind of pathetic, the headlines of all of his videos. He uses like I don't know, Republicans slam, all caps, Joe Biden for his disastrous, and then ... So you don't know what the rest, but it's like because I don't know, man. I see that, and with the capital letters on words like destroys, and I don't know, man. I would just think that I would hope that Ben Shapiro would think better of his audience than to use such. I mean, just go to his page and read him. It's pathetic. I still listen to Ben Shapiro though.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like it's like brevity is a powerful tool. If you can say something short, sweet, and concise, then that's what you want, especially if you can do it in a way that's catchy or funny or relates to people. So like you almost don't need to say everything if you can relate it to some cultural phenomenon that's happening right now. And then it kind of leaves it open for interpretation too, because people can read the same meme and draw slightly different relationships to that meme or to that short quippy argument that you'll hear, and like basically I think it's a different problem. I think there's something more fundamental, and what we're looking at is a symptom, and there's something, maybe it's phones or internet, or maybe it's just the fast-paced culture as we start communicating more and more in some way. But we have this issue holding people's attention for a long time, and it seems to have only gotten harder. Maybe that's because more people have access to the communication, or maybe it's because more people are doing that, and so their biology's changing. I'm not really sure. I tend to think the former, where it's just more people have access to TV and computers and the internet and people across the globe, and so as they go out to get more access, they aren't used that, like, the people don't want to. There's no desire to go out and try to find long form arguments for certain things when you already have your opinion of where you're at, and you just need that little cultural meme to broadcast that to your in group. And I think that's just something that underlies modern society more so than any other time in our time period. And I don't think it's really related. I don't think it's about the culture as much as it is just the way humans have always functioned, if I'm being honest. Which maybe that is culture, actually.
Yeah, so I think I think it's a complex question. I think it's pretty it seems convenient, but at the same time it rings true to blame technology, quote unquote, for our ails, right? I see this technology again as a another end of the spectrum, or further down the spectrum of the 24-hour news cycle, right? And in a 24-hour news cycle, you're incentivized to always have something to say, to always have a breaking story, right? This is the big news drop. This is the big thing about Russiagate. This is the big thing that's going to prove the election was stolen, yada, 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 right? And now you see this, and I think long form podcasts are incredibly important. And, I think it's the next wave of the future of our sense making apparatus evolution, right? But yeah, I mean, it's just the idea that everybody has, in this day and age, and this is going to be hypocritical because we're stating our opinions, right? But everybody has to have a fucking opinion about everything, right? Hey, Joe Rogan, what's your opinion on Pfizer? Hey, Russell Brand, what's your opinion on Boris Johnson? And it's like people need to learn, and I could take my own advice on this, to shut the hell up when they don't know what they're talking about, right? And it seems like everybody is a wise guy, everybody's an expert, and if everyone's an expert, no one's an expert, right? So I want to take a little bit of time to just talk about journalism, right? What is journalism? Journalism relies on several elements: news gathering, interviewing sources, researching, and trying to find as much information as possible. Journalists need a disciplined honesty about the limits of their knowledge. Originality means to do your own work, pursuing stories you find important and uncovering, possibly in a way that is different from your average journalist, like gonzo journalism with Hunter S. Thompson. Journalism is essentially a discipline of verification. How do you get reliable news in times of a legitimate information crisis? Well, for one, I think we need to know what journalism should look like, right? Again, what is journalism? The collection, preparation, and distribution of news and related commentary and featured materials, and dispersing that through mediums, right? Whether it be print, whether it be a podcast, whether it be a traditional news show. And again, why you want this is to have an informed electorate, to keep the government honest, because in the times of 1776, 1789, whatever, I mean, pick your year before the radio came around. Without media, people in South Carolina or Georgia or Maine or wherever they were would have no idea what's going on in Washington, right? And how would they expect it to be? And if they don't have an idea what their elected officials are doing, how is a democracy supposed to function, right? So this is incredibly important, in my opinion. How do y'all think that journalists and news outlets should tackle this perceived crisis of misinformation? How do y'all think the news can really get the people back on their side?
Remove all opinions.
All opinions?
Yes. Become incredibly staunch on a principle of no opinions embedded or right next to the news. So that means on a news channel, there should be no opinion pieces.
Right. And I agree with that. And like I said before, if you do have a opinion piece, you need to explicitly state it, right? I think that's the main thing with opinion pieces. I have no problem with opinion pieces, but it's the mixture between when you're watching the news, you can't really tell if it's an opinion or if it's supposed to be taken at face value as objective journalism, right?
Yeah.
And Andy, go ahead? What were you gonna say?
Oh yeah, I'm saying if CNN or whoever is going to have like opinion segments, like they should make it abundantly clear. Like right before the segment starts, it'll like a huge there'd be like a blaring warning siren of like opinion, and then it'll tell it, and then when it ends, it'll be like end of opinion segment. Be incredibly explicit when it's an opinion and when it's not. Or better yet, just don't be putting them right next to each other in the first place.
Yeah. So I'm under the opinion with this new technology that it's become a more rivalrous market, right? And in a more rivalrous market, if traditional news doesn't sell, sensationalism will, right? So it's the incentive structure, in my opinion, that's essentially off kilter. But yeah, I agree with that completely. I think if a news channel wanted, if they said this is day one of our reset, of our great reset, and we, and just in my opinion, it would be very easy. But from the outside looking in, it always seems that way. The problem is, they're beholden. The truth is that places like MSNBC and Fox News are just an extension of the campaign trail, right? And Fox News is actually, I want to draw attention to this. Fox News has actually gotten really blatant about it. So Hannity, I think it was 2015, he actually appeared at a campaign rally for Trump. And I don't know if this is illegal, but it's basically an absolute no-go zone in the area of journalism, right? It's not the fact that he appeared there, but he actually got up on stage, said some of Trump's slogans, called some of the people in the back fake news, played into the whole thing. And ever since they did that, they've been doing it ever since. And the fact that nobody's noticing that, it seems, and nobody's noticing that nobody's noticing is scary, right? Because that's not what it's all about, right? Again, this is going from being a right-wing news source to a right-wing propaganda network. And then, in my opinion, CNN Fox gets tons of viewers. And CNN saw this, right? And MSNBC saw this, and they said, we're just going to do what they're doing. The real news be damned, the objective news be damned, right? And that's essentially what I think they're doing.
There's a documentary called Brainwashing My Father or something
my
like
granddad.
that.
Yeah, Fox News and my grandpa or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so kind of going along with what you're saying, when it comes to the news, I personally believe CNN is one of the more reliable ones in terms of on the spectrum. There's the media bias chart available online that kind of, according to that group, I think it's like Ad Fonts or Font, I can't remember. They plot it all out in terms of their opinion versus objective truth. You got AP Reuters right in the center as far as objectivity goes. But some of these organizations, like CNN, it's been around forever. They're playing the long game in terms of, and they should. When we look back on history, right, on this particular moment, it would be nice to be able to say that we acted in a way that, if followed as we understood, would result in, the best possible outcome in terms of health and human safety, right? So the masks and the vaccines. That would be a great story in the history books for what we really tried to do. That long game narrative, which I think CNN has subscribed to the most. is going to play out in the history books. What did we do during that time? And that story, that narrative is often written in what we report in the news, the ABC, CBC, CBS, all that shit. So, that's versus, yeah, that's just my thought.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying they're playing the long game. So basically, when historians look back 20 years from now and said, what was CNN's role in this? CNN can say, we promoted masks, we promoted vaccines, we attacked vaccine hesitancy. We did everything we did everything in our power to protect the populace and keep them informed. But essentially, you're saying they're playing the game of quote unquote being on the right side of history. Is that a fair summation?
Perfect. That the right side of history is what I think. And then you could take the other side, and maybe their view of the right side of history is measured in economic prosperity, and clearly we're in a situation now that is arguably the result of some of these right side of history decisions. But and they'll just say, well, we measure success in terms of human life versus dollars, and it's that's what we hope that history will say, that we were a good civilization, and we had our value structure properly aligned, and these were the actions we took.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. Lexicon, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Lexicon, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I want to ask you a few questions. What do you think of the increased politicization of talk shows, like Stephen Colbert, I think James Corbin, all these other, to essentially become cheerleading squads for the? Well, I won't say anything more. I'll just ask you the question. What do you think about that?
I got so tired of fact checking them and always finding them wrong, I stopped watching them. I haven't seen one in 8 months, maybe a year.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. It can take a lot of time fact checking. So let me ask you this. In your opinion, what is one of the best examples of when the media got it, when the mainstream media, quote unquote, got it 100% wrong, totally wrong? They were shown as liars, and then they doubled down, or what sticks out in your mind as one of those moments?
The kid who went to a protest and had a native bang a drum in his face and almost had his life destroyed and went to jail. Kyle Rittenhouse is another example. The time CNN took time out of their day to directly threaten an innocent civilian for making a meme back in 2016, going as far as saying that they would dox this unknown man to the internet and unleash a horde of people upon him. Until he complied and removed it and apologized. And then when he sued them and took them to court, the judge said he is not a public figure, you can't do this, pay the fine. And CNN's argument was, we made him a public figure by attacking him, so that doesn't count.
I haven't heard that story about the doxing, CNN doxing, but I'll look that up.
He's the guy responsible for the meme of Trump when he was in the WWE, and they put CNN over the face of the person he slams into the ground.
Oh yeah. I've definitely seen that meme. Yeah, where he clotheslines Vince McMahon.
Yeah,
and they got
CNN went after the guy who made that.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm surprised that even went to court. I mean,
Well, they were directly threatening to publish his living house. Like they were using the threat of doxing as a people will come and kill you. Like that was insinuated in the letter they sent to him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was saying I'm surprised it went to court because of slander or libel, but are you saying that kid brought them to court?
Yeah, he basically sued them for I forget what it was, but he had them. He basically tried to charge them criminally and ended up dealing with it in civil court.
What about? I mean, the one that sticks out to me because we saw it play out. We got to see Sanjay Gupta face the judgment, face the person they were accusing head on, and got steamrolled when CNN was saying, I mean, despite how you feel about ivermectin, right? And I don't know of any evidence to suggest that it does help with COVID, but when they kept saying it's a horse medication, right? And it's literally won the Nobel Prize for antiviral in humans, right? And then Sanjay Gupta, the doctor, one of the head doctors of CNN, goes on CNN or goes on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan asks him, "Why did your news network do that?" What? And he's like, stumbles around, and he's like, "What do they do?" And he's like, "Dude, they fucking lied." He's like, "I can afford people medicine, motherfucker." And you saw Sanjay did not have an answer to that.
I would almost never defend CNN. I think they're as close to evil as a news organization can get. But they right, though. Like, legally on paper, they didn't do anything wrong by calling it horse medication.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Because ivermectin is used in so many species, they could have called it friggin' hamster medication if they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that, Lexicon. I can't see the name. The frog emoji fella. Are you there? Pepe the Frog, how are you doing? I want to ask you a question if you're there.
Me?
Yes, you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Let me find a good one. Do you think the media has been fair to Biden? Why or why not?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the media.
Yeah. Do you think Fox has been fair to Biden? Fox News.
No.
Do you think CNN has been fair to Biden?
Not always, but more so. They're very critical of Biden many times.
Yeah.
And MSNBC is just too nice. So I watch all three, by the way.
Yeah, that's a good tact, I believe.
Yeah, I don't. MSNBC is just too one-sided for me. I mean, you got to find someone that tries to be fair. And I know a lot of people don't like CNN, but CNN does have reporters all over the world. They have people that go into war zones, even, or conflict areas. They had a guy that went to North Korea quite regularly. So, and they still have that woman that goes into Afghanistan. So you have to have some respect for somebody, right? To some level. And I'm not defending CNN, but when they have problems, they fire people. Look at what happened with Chris Cuomo, right? And now the head of CNN resigned as a result. And what about those guys that got fired a couple years back for putting out false stories?
Right. Yeah,
producers or whatever.
Yeah, I think this goes to. I see a basic asymmetry between how different news is treated, right? Like when ABC or even CNN gets it wrong, it's easy for all the right-wing outlets to zero in on that, because normally that has become sort of the narrative of a lot of governments, right? It's become sort of the vanilla narrative, right? So it's very easy to see holes in a narrative that's very prevalent, right? But when Fox News or MSNBC News get something wrong, it's like we expect them to get it wrong, right? So the fact that they're worse makes them appear not as bad, and the fact that CNN and New York Times are more trustworthy, it makes it seem worse when they do get things wrong. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I agree with that. I remember talking to some people that really vehemently hated CNN, and I said, yeah, but it's when they screw up, do they admit to it? You know, when they get caught screwing up, you know, do they do something? It's more what they do about it, you know, and is it the right thing to do? And I said, you know, I mentioned, you know, those guys that got fired. This is a couple of years ago debate that I had. And they said, well, see how bad CNN is because they have, but they fired the guys. That was my point. They didn't, the people that were arguing with me thought it was, you know, see how bad they are because they got these people. But how many organizations actually, you know, come forth and do something about it, right? To some level.
Could I jump in on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cuomo is a very great example of the extreme exception. Typically, when these people make mistakes or make out, I would call them crimes, but whatever. When people do these kinds of things, typically what happens is they will be forcibly resigned and then moved to a different department where they resurface 5-6 years later quietly, and they're never truly fired. They're just recirculated. When people screw up on MSNBC, they get sent to CNN. When CNN gets screwed up, they get sent elsewhere, and then eventually it comes back to Fox and blah, 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 blah. The top media corporations in the country are owned by only 2 separate companies, so they just shift people. They don't ever actually fire anyone. There's a very well-known policy of failing upward in journalism right now that desperately needs sorted out.
Okay, so did you know that Chris Cuomo used to work for Fox?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how did that work?
Well, that's what I'm saying. He's one of the extreme examples of someone who actually did something wrong and was permanently removed.
Okay, so
Typically,
give me an example of something that fits the bill you're talking about.
The lady
How about Juan Williams?
The lady on MSNBC who accidentally made she dropped the N-word, but she didn't actually drop the N-word. People just thought she did because she said something and Lakers. No, there was 2 different sports teams. It happens all the time. You say one team followed by the other, put together, that combination sounds like the N-word. She got fired and reshuffled from MSNBC to a background reporter on CNN. And then 2 years later, she's back on MSNBC. They just move people when controversy pops up.
Yeah, but that's not them getting something wrong, right?
Yeah, that wasn't controversy though. That was just something that happened that people took the wrong way and got enough complaints.
It's
but do you
people
think
not
that
being
person?
held accountable.
Yeah, do you think that
general.
person did something that they should be held accountable for though?
Not typically, but
well, that's the example. Yeah, but that's what I'm looking for is an example of someone that's held accountable that fits the you know what you described there, right? Because I've never heard of that before.
The lady with extreme TDS still has her show. After she pushed
Joy Behar?
No, I can't remember her name. Tim's always constantly reeing about her ad nauseum. I've almost
Rachel Maddow.
Rachel
Maddow.
Yeah, someone who pushed a known lie even long after it had already been shown not to be true for like an extra year. You're not a journalist if you're.
You're talking about the Russia collusion hoax that she said 10 times a day on her show for the whole time Trump was president.
Yeah, you just your job as a journalist is to bring facts and interesting points so that people can learn about the world around them, not be a propagandist. And it's wrong. It needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, though, you know, Chris is an example, extreme example, perhaps on one way, but you know, it's like you're digging for extreme examples the other way that fits your bill, right? So I don't know. I don't think it's a common thing what you're saying.
So you know who Juan Williams is?
Oh yeah.
So Juan Williams used to be a reporter on NPR. Did you know that? That was that's where he. So he got fired for being politically incorrect.
And where is he now?
And then he got hired at Fox News. He was on Fox News for a long time.
Yeah, he was on the 5 or something, I
Yeah,
think.
but
Yeah.
Fox News is like literally a propaganda outlet.
All the large 3-letter organizations.
That's what we're talking about. These
for news.
Well-
they're all propagandists, and it's
like,
not the
are you
type of
so
propaganda.
blind that you think that any of these aren't propaganda outlets?
Yeah,
Not
they're
to the
all-
same, not to the same degree. For example, talk about CNN's opinion section and their hosts of their daytime television. But CNN reporters around the world are revered. Right? CNN literally has people boots on the ground all
Yeah,
around the world
like
doing
Wolf
actual journalism.
Wolf Blitzer,
Oh, come on.
I'm not talking about.
Yeah, but
I
that's
actually want to do a bit of a
guy
rollback here.
for
I
the
actually want to do a bit of a
Iraq
rollback
War.
here. I want to take back something.
Totally neutral. Wolf Blitzer.
I actually want to take back something I said. None of these large 3-letter organizations, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, none of them are actually propaganda outlets. What happens is you have someone at the top who likes a particular narrative, and they only hire people that go for that particular narrative. You get hired on CNN.
But Fox News was literally founded by Robert Ailes to put the GOP on daytime television. That was the goal of Fox News. Like,
sure,
from
but,
the inception. That wasn't like with that's like me saying like like Hamas isn't a terrorist organization. Like, well,
Yeah,
their
but that's
founding
not-
was that, and you say, well, it's not like that anymore, right?
Propaganda is controlling information by a governmental source, not just anyone.
So yeah, like if there's an individual who happens to have enough
Fox
money
News
and they
hosts
want to
were
advocate for
in
a
communication
political career,
with
that's fine.
the president and GOP leaders throughout this entire last 4 years. Things that were said on Fox News were repeated by the president that same day. What are we talking about? This is entirely different.
So if it was
than
a
things happening on-
propaganda organization for the government, then it would be just for one side.
Right now, it is, yeah.
So this brings me
But
to
Fox News also had people constantly criticizing Trump for his entire campaign as well.
We're talking about after the campaign, right?
Here, I'm gonna ask Lexicon. I'm gonna ask you a
after the
question.
campaign, while he was in power.
They were literally
ask-
talking. Mark Meadows was in talks with Hannity and Laura Ingraham during the January 6th riot.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying, but it went both ways on CNN, or not CNN, Fox News. Some people were vehemently anti-Trump, and some people were for Trump. It just depends on which time of day you went after Fox News. That's why Trump
the same thing on CNN though. I mean, like this is splitting hairs now. Where we're saying like, oh well, like we're every side does the same thing. Oh, but the side that I like, it just happens to be the one news source that I like. They're the ones that are actually not doing it as bad.
Really like to get to the end of that statement.
That's just a little. It's just a little.
Exactly right. Scott's exactly right. They're all fucking. They're all reading for one side and against the other one.
Yeah. So, Dan, you were right when you said that the Fox News was contrived as a outlet to get the GOP to know. Fox News was contrived to get the GOP to be known to the public through television. The end result of this, however, though, was a very strong split in the GOP between people who really like Trump and the political establishment who have vested interests in the military-industrial complex and the Middle East and various other projects going on in the States. Of those people who were particularly not on Trump's side, the anti-populist establishment people, those people hated Trump. So they have some power enough to get people onto Fox. And then there's the people who really like Trump because Trump's really good for ratings, so Fox also chased that.
Yeah, but also Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, the exact same dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. The establishment has no interest in populists. And so
I just like to call a spade, and right now, from what I see, as it currently stands, Fox News is the biggest proprietor of this literal like propaganda. I would agree that during the 2016 election, MSNBC
biggest
was
by size, or do you mean by the most egregious of
egregious?
acts?
I would say the most egregious.
Let me jump in. Let me jump in here. Real. I don't go ahead, Dan. Then sorry.
And behind that, I would say, for example, like the New York Times and CNN don't even get close to what's the closest you'll get to it is like MSNBC, which every single show is like Trump destroying the country. Every single
I think CNN's articles online, not their front and center reporters, are where most of their egregious, messed up stuff happens. Their written works they got some really bad bias and some really bad.
Yeah, if you could
Usually
I
when
just wanna
Tim's going after them, it's for stuff that they've written, not stuff that they've shown on air.
Yeah, well, you know, this is why I like to use the resource of Ad Fontes. Ad Fontes is a third-party organization that rates the reliability of news organizations, and they have a wonderful chart that shows bias, accuracy. Each data point is accessible through a graphical like user interface that you can just literally click on it. If anyone's interested in the middle of playing a game, just you go look up Ad Fontes Media bias chart, and you'll literally like see exactly what's going on, and it changes monthly depending on input and their analysis. And it's shocking. It's actually shocking to see where some of these organizations stand in comparison to others through what are seen as objective ways to measure. They give you their whole methodology and the like.
Cool.
Yeah,
that's a good thing to look at.
It's like the Consumer Reports of news.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to look at. So, like, all the news people have some sort of bias. Like when you have a two-party system, like they're either not saying opinion, like Andy said, or they're saying their opinion for one side or the other. Because there's not really like an opinion journalist that goes out there and says, "Here's some information. Why don't you make your own decision?" And the information is the whole truth.
I would also want to add that I don't think bias is necessarily bad, right? Like a non-biased journalism would not convey its bias against the Nazis in Nazi Germany. It would try to stay objective. I don't think it's bad necessarily. Like you might need to be a little biased sometimes because
bias against your enemies is good, right? Like to get people aligned on a.
I mean, would you not agree that it's the journalism should say their opinion whether or not Hitler is good or bad?
Right, like that's what I'm saying. Bias against your enemy is good.
So, Doolittle, I want to ask you this question. What are the key distinctions that you can draw to reliably differentiate propaganda from as close to objective as we can get objective news reporting? What's a heuristic that you use to determine that?
Man, I freaking had a whole list of this that I wrote for Chad. I haven't thought about it in quite a while.
You wrote it for Chad?
Yeah, I wrote it for Chad. Yeah. Man. So some heuristics to tell when something is propaganda.
Yeah.
When the message is emotionally charging is a good when you read something and the language is there, the language that's there is something that really gets you spun up.
Right.
It's there. The language tries to make you feel fear or greed or something like that. When the language when the language is supportive of the quote unquote official narrative. So, like for example, I'm talking about propaganda specifically, which means that it's likely something that was created by the government to reinforce to reinforce public opinion on their policies.
Well, why would it be created by the government, though?
Because he's asking about propaganda.
Yeah, but I mean that type of fear type thing is used all the time in scam emails.
I'll let you answer
computer stuff.
Yeah, so he's asking me the heuristics.
Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, so
I mean,
people do use fear.
Go ahead.
Right? That's a common persuasion tactic, right? So if people are using persuasion to try to get you to change, if the article is written to get you to form an opinion, okay, then that's a persuasion article, and so propaganda is two things. One is that it's written by the government or a proxy of the government in order to reinforce public opinion about the government's about their policy objectives, and it's trying to persuade you, right? So So you look at it's emotionally charged. It uses strong persuasion. It's light on actual facts, and it's
let me stop you real quick.
It's predominantly written in line with what the official narrative is.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you just said. On the light of facts part, I think it's more about they could be high on facts, right? But all they need to do is exclude the facts that undermine their narrative. So they could present a lot of facts, but they just lie by omission, right?
Like here, I'll give you an example. Okay, so if you're reading an article about like I search for is the COVID vaccine like what is the I search for an article, what is the death rate due to adverse vaccine side effects, and I get pointed to a website and it says debunking COVID vaccine myth, the COVID vaccine may cause adverse side effects. And then the debunking is, we all know that the COVID vaccine is safe and effective, right? Like I'm looking for statistics, and they say, okay, here's the facts about the COVID vaccine side effects, and they say it's safe and effective. It's safe for all age groups. It's safe for young. It's safe for old. It's effective. COVID vaccine, and they don't say what the statistics are. You're looking for facts. You're looking for numbers, and they put it in a position that somebody will find it who's looking for numbers. But there's no numbers there. All that's there is the words that
there's no numbers. There's no data. There's just conclusions, is what you're saying.
The conclusion, it says right up front. Here's the conclusion you're supposed to draw. Here's the emotions you're supposed to feel, and here's a link to the government website where you can find more information. You go to the government website and it says the vaccine is safe and effective, and it doesn't say any fucking statistics. There's no, like, a scientist wants to go and read it, and it's like, you're not gonna find anything about the actual science behind it. You're gonna find opinions. You're gonna find someone telling you what emotion to feel, and you're gonna find somebody telling you what you should believe, like right up on the top.
Right.
So that's what I'm talking about. So when I say light on facts, that's what I'm talking about.
Gotcha. I want to take this opportunity real quick, then I'm going to ask Dan a question. I want to go to things we can do to increase our media literacy, right? I think we can ask basic questions when we see something. And this could be, this is normally going to pertain to media that has to do with government and politics, but it could be Adidas versus Nike, right? It could be stuff like that. It could be, there's all kinds of propaganda, right? But anyways, I think 5 main questions we can ask is 1, who made the message, right? 2, what creative techniques are used to catch your attention? And you could insert whatever word in substitute for creative there, coercive or, whatever you want. 3, how might other people understand this message differently from me, right? So, is it catered to a certain audience? Is it designed to trigger me? How would somebody from a different background respond to this? 4, what lifestyle values and points of view are expressed and or omitted from this message, right? And 5 is, why is this message being sent in the first place? So in other words, what's the end game, right? And of course, this isn't foolproof. Again, these are heuristics, but I think it's kind of ABC 1, 2, 3 Dr. Seuss shit, but I think it can be very effective, right? So that leads me into Dan. I'm going to ask you, what are some rules of thumb to become more media literate? And I want to thank Dan for suggesting this topic when me and him were talking a couple days ago. So take it away.
I think one of the first of all is try to look at third party testers and people who categorize, like I said, Ad Fontes Media as the beautiful, wonderful source. I posted like a short screen clipping of the January 2022 positions. An important thing is look for sources. Always look for sources. Click on your sources. Whatever it is you read, if it has no source, throw it. It's garbage. And if it has a source, click on the source. And if that source is another webpage, look for more sources. Until you get to the primary source, fuck it. It's irrelevant to you. The second thing that's important to recognize, start following journalists, not just media outlets. So as someone who, if my general day when I read news, I read Haaretz, I read ProPublica, The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, The JP, and the AP, and NPR. But within these are specific journalists that I like to follow, that I have starred, and then I kind of look at their pieces, like different international journalists who work in these areas who I have seen post reliable things and generally cite and source all of their articles. For me, that's an important thing. Systemically, I think it should be a classes for news media literacy in high school. I think it's an important thing that we don't have right now. I don't know if I remember going to high school and I remember sitting in class and having an essay, and as long as I had a source on it, I would get 100. And the second I stepped into college, after I think my second year, all of a sudden I had a professor circle my source and tell me and give me a C because my source wasn't good. I quickly learned that I need to make sure that my sources are good, because in high school, any source you give, they're okay with. And that's a serious problem. So I think an important thing is education that is more rigorous around this, education that teaches people how to find good sources on the internet, because it's not like, you go to a library and you go to the nonfiction section and the publishers have liabilities. Everything is on the same shelf, and it's very hard to know the difference. And past that, personally, just look for sources, follow journalists, don't follow outlets.
Dan, the chart you've posted here has BBC and friggin' TYT way higher than they should ever be. BBC is a literal propaganda outlet for the country. That's its literal intent. And they've been doing woke nonsense for 5 years solid now, firing 30% of their staff to get rid of white people and all kinds of crazy shit.
I don't know what to tell you, man. I am not the person to argue this. This is a third party. You can look at their methodology.
And I'm just saying your third party has a very clear bias to extreme left.
Okay, so
hang on. Because they're firing white people?
They're literally saying they've been taken to court and fined an F ton of money.
Could it be that you just have a really right wing biance into everything that's not?
I think racist is a pretty extreme bias.
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. I know I messaged you, but I think this could be one of the best third party ones because of the way that it is done. Every single data point in the interactive chart can be clicked on. You can look at the articles yourself. They have their methodology, and it changed. So you can go ahead and argue with it.
I stopped watching TYT because I was an avid fan, even subscribed to them at one point. And I don't mean on YouTube. I mean paid them money every month. And as they went downhill and lost their minds, I left.
Yeah, I mean TYT is literally bottom left in selective incomplete story, unfair persuasion / propaganda /
and they have them higher than a guy who does nothing but read news articles from CNN, The Guardian, New York Times.
Well, maybe there's a reason for it, right?
You got to.
They even have OAN. They have OAN higher than Ben Shapiro's show. Why?
Yeah, so look, just listen. Journalists in general are going to be a little farther left than the average in the mean in the population, right? So if you have a meta study done by somebody who's an expert in journalism, then the thing that they consider the center of journalism is going to be left of the average population, because journalists are necessarily language oriented people, and that's what that's it's kind of what makes you kind of drift to the left, is when your mind is oriented like that. People that are muddy boots farmers and stuff like that, they're almost all relatively to the right, and those people don't turn into journalists. So you just have to realize that there's gonna be a left bias in journalism in general everywhere in the world, because people that aren't on the left are attracted to journalism in as high as numbers. So the center of journalism,
this is shown. I think you're right, though. This is shown on the chart. If you look at news out there, they generally lean left, like ABC, CNN, MSNBC, The Hill. They're more on like to the middle, and then like a couple of cents to the left. Like the peak isn't in the center. This is displayed by the chart, and just go through their methodology. This is not something.
Well, I'm definitely going through the methodology, because there's quite a number that I agree with, and quite a number that I completely like. It's mind-boggling that they could even think to put them there.
This is something that I learned through my friend, who maybe I should have brought on for this, who is a journalism major. So,
yeah, I mean, Roger Ailes, to back up Doolittle's point, Dan's point, about, and I think you could say the same thing about institutions of higher learning, about any type of art, group of artists, liberal art college. Like, it's all going to shift to the left. I mean, there's many reasons for this. Maybe it's personality. I would assume it has a lot to do with psychology, right? But there's a Roger Ailes quote, who he was one of the main people who started Fox, and he was fond of saying, quote, it was, the news is like a boat. If you let go of the wheel, it tends to steer left. Which the implication of that statement is that you have to steer it. You have to take you have to put your hands on the wheel, metaphorically, and steer it to the right to, quote unquote, get balance, right? And I think there's some truth to that. And I've heard Ben Shapiro say this. He says, like when people might come down on him for whatever he's done, he'll say, guys, at the end of the day, I'm just bringing balance. I'm just bringing balance. The left has Hollywood. They have higher institutions of learning. They have most of the mainstream media, except for a few conservative outlets. I'm just bringing balance. So, I think there's a lot of truth to that. Bruce, are you there?
Yeah, only for a few minutes. What's up?
All right, cool. I want to ask you a question. All right. If you had a magic wand, okay, let me ask you this question. How detrimental is it that news outlets don't correct themselves when they get something wrong?
How detrimental? I think it's very detrimental. I think it's very, in the same way that I would think it was detrimental for individuals to not admit their shortcomings and ask for forgiveness when they're wrong.
Yeah. And do you think if news outlets did that more often, that people would be much more forgiving for their mistakes? I mean, it seemed like they do that with individuals, right?
Unfortunately, no. Because really? the retractions don't come quick enough with the news cycle, and people are and there are people in their camps that are only willing to take headlines and can reconfirm their biases. So I don't think it would be a significant enough swing. I also don't think it does much for their branding usually, because the more you have to retract or even ask for forgiveness, the less reliable you become, unfortunately, in the eyes of the public. The public doesn't treat them like individuals as they should. They treat them like entities that should be unbiased.
Yeah. And especially, I agree with that. And especially with the 24-hour news cycle, if you screw up, right, another big story, it's a 24-hour news cycle, so a big story, I use that lightly, right? Another big story will come along, and people concentrate on that, or whatever Fox News has drummed up, or whatever CNN has drummed up, or what have you, right? And
ZMO,
going on to the next controversy. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I add to that? So, like, Tim Pool, who many of you are familiar with as being like a pretty centrist fence sitter without really strong opinions, and he's worked for various news outlets, and he's pointed out like many times on his show that this is a deliberate tactic that's used by the mainstream media to get them. They take an issue which it's politically expedient for them to take a side on it right away before all the information comes out, so they can actually form public opinion by taking a side on that and telling you what you're supposed to think about it, twisting the facts, bending the story into what fits the narrative that they want to push. Right. And they do this knowing that they don't have the information to confirm it, or knowing that it's genuinely false from the get-go, and it takes 2 or 3 days for the truth to come out, and then they do a retraction after the damage is done when nobody's paying attention.
Tim Pool does exactly the same thing, though. I've researched
Tim Pool is definitely not a centrist.
I'm not making a claim that Tim Pool doesn't do the same thing.
No, I would just push.
He's actually the worst example.
I would just push back on Tim Pool being a centrist. He's definitely not a centrist.
Yeah, what do you think? Well, he's not. He's
not
definitely
anymore.
Right of view, Dan.
No. According to objective sources, he's like partisan right wing. Not according to me.
Guys,
I just want to quickly go through this. Dan, I took the time to actually look up exactly what they're judging Tim on based on the chart where you just found him in his objective third-party source. And the only thing they have listed for sources that they are judging Tim Pool on is his podcast, not him reading his news sources or when he's doing journalism, only his podcast. And honestly, the rating they give him fits perfectly to that. Hyper-partisan right. His podcast is insane. They have everyone from Alex Jones to freaking I can't remember the guy's name, but he's literally insane.
Nick Fuentes,
Stefan Molyneux, or
no. It was a guy Adam Ragusa or something. Some dude who was on a show for the first 100.
Adam Cast, Adam Cast, yeah.
And that guy is a nut job. So 100%, the way they've judged him here makes sense. If they actually did his news sourcing, I guarantee you he'd be much higher in the central box.
Yeah, that would be the same thing as saying if you only look at
but they've selectively only done his podcast. That's
one at a time. That
would be the same. Tim Pool as an entity is much more unified than like Fox News and Fox Business. You can make a big distinction on there as they're separate entities. But
he's like one person.
Yeah, he's one person.
Okay,
and as a whole, as
unified.
Okay, but Dan, if I only ever took right-wing statements you've ever made and then judged you on that, of course you're going to appear more right-wing.
It's not about right. It's like
How about if you fired the right-wing guy and then hired a left-wing guy to replace him? Like, does that make you far right? Like,
it's not about. It's not just about that. Okay,
Jesus Christ.
All right.
It's clear. It's clear for anyone that Tim Pool is not a centrist. It's like
it's clear that you've identified him as an enemy.
I don't identify him as so. First of all, as enemy. I've never used those words as enemy versus not enemy. Wow. Not once. I haven't used those words. TYT is an enemy in that language. I hate TYT.
I would put Tim Pool as a social liberal with a extreme conservative bias towards guns, freedom of speech, and the leave me alone nonsense. Like taxation.
I also say that would it be wrong to say that you think Tim Pool is your friend? Like you like Tim Pool, you watch Tim Pool, you reference.
I watched Tim Pool
because I agree with him on a lot of things.
I watched Tim Pool because he's good at finding good articles that I can then go find. I'm using him as a sub filter.
So you're being filtered through him.
I watched the first 5 minutes of whatever he's posted, and then I go look at the thing he's dug up, and then I go look at other stuff. Tim Pool is just one of many sources. I don't just watch Tim Pool.
I was challenged to watch Tim Pool, so I took at the time his most, like a 2-day-old podcast, and I reviewed it really carefully. And the very first article that he talked about was a article about a silhouette. It was a picture, and there was a dub over it said Black Lives Matter, and it was a silhouette of a person holding up their fist and a fire in the background. And it ended up being a fake meme, and it was removed from, it took me over 20 minutes or half an hour just to find the original source, and it was taken down from, I think, Twitter or someone, because it was a fake meme. Okay, that's fine. Maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't. People said it was a made up picture. It wasn't. It was put together, and it wasn't anything to do with black. It was like old information.
It was an artistic
Well,
interpretation.
sure, but
So-
then I kept going here. This is the next one is even a worse clincher. You remember that couple that was guarding their house when people were walking through the gated community, and the woman
the
holding some
McCloskeys.
pistol. Yeah, the pistol. It looked like she didn't even know how to handle a gun.
And it didn't have a firing pin.
I guess, I don't know. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is that Tim Pool posted that story and posted things like, look at the gate that they damaged and stuff. And I looked at that very carefully. And the gate that was damaged was from a totally different time, because you can find the video of the Black Lives Matter people walking through there, and the gate. There was no video of them damaging the gate. They said this is what they did afterwards. But if you look closely, the grass was at a different height at the other side. There were marks on in the video. There were marks on the pavement that the city had put, like they put lines down with spray paint when they're going to do something, so many feet or whatever, that type of stuff. It looks like they're going to do some digging around, and that wasn't in the gate. Thing. How did this all suddenly disappear in the grass? And anyways, the point is that he posted things that and stuck stuff together that was total lie, and people bought it. I'm not defending Black Lives Matter, what they did or anything like that, but if you take a story and you assemble it in such a way that fits your bias and gets you all worked. Look at those people. That's what he did. After I talked to the people that told me I should be watching Tim Pool on it. There were others too. There's no need to belabor it, but they wouldn't buy it. They'd get all mad at me. So, because people go by headlines, and they don't. It's like that other gentleman, I can't remember who was talking. When you can't just go by headlines. You have to read an article and see if it has cites any sources. I discount them if they don't cite any sources. If they're just an opinion piece, I just throw them out. There's no point even reading it.
That is precisely what
high school, these kids.
An anonymous source close to Donald Trump has revealed to us his true intentions.
No.
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Yeah. Let me ask the room. What is y'all's opinion of? Now I'm going to blank on it. Anonymous sources, are they to be trusted? Are there certain situations where it's called for? I'm assuming there are. I'm sure
there's anonymous sources who reported that the Russian figure skaters were doping, and it's all on CBS Nightly News, and they're citing anonymous sources in Russia that they're
you gotta apply weight to it. All right, like if it's an anonymous source, I give it less. No, it's not. What are you talking about? It's not zero. You have to give it some. No, you give it less weight than other sources. That's all. It's not.
You give it negative weight. It's the biggest red flag that the story's made up.
That's not being very anonymous sources. If what they're saying is corroborated by speculative evidence or type of it, shouldn't be accounted as fact, but it should point in the right direction, right? Anonymous sources especially when we talk about governments and people speaking who are in working positions who don't want to lose their jobs. Anonymous sources have value. Now, specific journalists will have both anonymous sources and other sources, and will try to corroborate what the anonymous sources say with some sort of tangible evidence. You'll hear this is something that is an organization that I really like called ProPublica does a lot of great journalism work, and in order for that journalism work to get insider takes, they need anonymous sources, or else they just can't get what they need to get. Right? This is just how it works.
Right.
Especially, so of course anonymous sources are necessary, and of course they're good. They're extremely valuable to start opening the door.
Well, listen.
Yeah, they're valuable for leads, but they're not valuable as the source for a news story.
Dan was talking about the importance of education in terms of improving media literacy, and that's what we're doing in the high schools for the first time ever. In one of our units, I asked the kids if there was one of our core rights that you'd be willing to give up. What would it be? This was intro to the 1984 dystopia unit. And for the first time, a kid said freedom of the press. and then he kind of chimed out like everything's fake news. These kids they don't even watch the news, but someone's telling them that. And so this is what we have coming. This is what's coming up, kids. And then what's the alternative? You give up the freedom of press and you have a government run press? That's even worse. So but they're not educated, right? And so and the adults now aren't either. We are in here, but most adults aren't. You know who's the worst offenders? Old people, right? And old people vote. So once the next wave,
some old people,
lots
of old people.
Yeah. So do you think it's accurate that the only thing worse than freedom of the press is censorship?
Exactly. So anyway, I'm out of here, guys. We'll talk.
Thank you.
Well, old people are subject to the same problems that the internet is tossing out there as young people.
Yeah, and now they're becoming more connected on the internet, and they're just as susceptible to those biases.
I'm one of those old people. I'm 65, but I've had tech since 1980. I've watched the internet grow. So for me, it's normal life.
Well,
I think part of the reason why some people have such a big problem with things like CNN and Fox is not just because that it's not that they're actually like lying a ton and stuff. It's the size of these corporations. In the same way that like the world seems more dangerous now because we have more communication. If you have, however many people work at CNN, my God, you get 2 or 3 liars, and it makes it's a bad apple problem. It's not. The part that bothers me is as an organization,
most adults aren't. You know who's the worst offenders?
I wasn't sure if that was someone talking or if that was background noise from Vivek. So typically, though, it's CNN, Fox News, BBC, and MSNBC are the 4 that, when they're caught lying, and I don't know if this is like a tactic their lawyers tell them is good or something, they'll double down for quite a while before they go, okay, we were wrong. It takes them a really long time. And by the time they do, okay, we were wrong, they'll release it on a Friday when no one's paying attention at the end of the day. And that kind of shit just bothers me at a deep level.
Well, I think it should bother. I mean, it bothers me, and I think that should bother everyone, right? I mean, it's obvious manipulation of, the human psyche, right? And of the medium itself, right?
I take issue with that because every time someone has ever said that to me, I want that person to cite me their best source of this actually happening in organizations like CNN. I want to, if that actually happens, I'd like to know where that is. Their best source.
Okay, don't watch Tim Pool's podcast. That's a waste of your time. He goes insane. He has insane guests. That's Tim being Alex Jones and selling foodstuffs. That's a waste of your time. Actually take like 5 minutes to go look at the things when he's being Tim Pool, the news journalist, and look at the articles he's looking, because he really likes attacking mainstream media. It's one of his favorite things. So if you want to find those sources, you can find them, because his sources are never.
I want your best source, though. Don't you? I thought you researched this stuff yourself. Don't you have one big example?
No, because I don't keep a folder on my computer and save all these sources. I'm not a journalist.
Yeah, but hang on. When I told you when I researched Tim Pool's podcast, that was like almost over a year ago, and that's on the top of my head. I picked my best example.
That's what I'm saying. His podcast is a total waste of time.
Well, I know that, but don't you have an example of what you're trying to say, though?
I can think. I have a number in my head. That's the number of times I've heard somebody use a talking point at a source explaining what's going on and that the company's lying. I do not have a specific source that I've saved somewhere because I don't care enough to I wasn't prepared for this conversation, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. No, that's
what are you asking for? What are you asking for specifically? An example of Frog. What's your name? I'm sorry.
Boris. Boris is
Boris.
Fine. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay, boys.
I'm asking for an example of a news organization, lying about something or saying something wrong and then doubling down and then releasing it on Friday. Any of those would fit, right? Like, because
Okay,
I don't.
well, Fox
so like the
News
Nick Sandman,
lied like
the Nick
crazy.
Sandman,
What
the Nick
about
Sandman story is
Russiagate?
exactly that.
What about Russiagate?
Okay, yeah, Russiagate, sure, why not?
Oh, you
Well,
guys keep track of that?
Let's go
hang on.
further back just so you can see how systemic it is. Fox News lied about 9/11 for fucking ever, claiming that it was Afghanistan and Pakistan that were
That's Fox
responsible.
News. Yeah, I agree with you there.
Same thing. So
But
CNN,
I'd like to know what CNN did though, or
CNN
MSNBC.
So MSNBC and CNN both at the same time did this exact same thing as Fox News. They followed that
did,
same narrative.
They lied about 9/11?
Yes, they said that it was people from Afghanistan. They said it was people in Iraq. They were going with the Bush narrative at the time. They were criticizing Bush on his failure as a president to foresee this happening, but at the same time they were saying we still need to bomb Iraq. They were doing the exact same thing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gotta double check, but I'm pretty sure they were also responsible for 1 second.
A lot of this stuff that the government initially went off information like there's WMDs. A lot of that stuff can be found printed in the New York Times, CNN. I mean, it wasn't just Fox News. I mean, people
but also let's
forget
look at the wording. The wording was
right?
the United States CIA is reporting that they have found blah blah. That is entirely different than we have evidence that this is happening, right? We have to be careful. Like, journalists use specific language carefully. This is also important to realize that a lot of times the United States CIA is reporting that they have found this. According to this general, these pictures are pictures of WMDs, et cetera, forward. This is where there is nuance to these claims.
I can't believe I actually pulled this out of the ether of my mind.
Dismissing
Back in
lying by calling it
1998,
nuance.
CNN claimed that U.S. Was killing its own defectors from the Vietnam War with nerve gas. And AP has an article about how CNN had to retract this story and go, whoops, we lied. But it took them forever to fucking do it. So, they've been doing this for years.
Did they not fire those people? I thought those were some of the ones that got fired. I don't know about that. It sounds familiar. I'm
sure I could.
That's where Peter Annette is today.
I mean, honestly, the idea that like major news outlets don't lie occasionally to do the bidding of the government, major not more trustworthy than others than not. I mean, quite frankly, I find naive. And sure, I could find some sources, but that's just me. I'm not equivocating anything, but I'm sure I could find CNN articles that kind of led us into Iraq just as much as Fox News did. Maybe not just as much, but But anyways, I think it's an interesting talk.
I think a lot of people got fooled, though, right? About that, not just news organizations. I mean, I'm Canadian. And I remember Chrétien at the time, which was our prime minister, basically saying, screw you guys, we ain't going with you in Iraq because we think you're wrong. And I mean, he did it at the 11th hour, obviously, because he had to decide sometime. And he waited till as much information as was available. And then he made the decision at the 11th hour to tell the U.S. we're not going to follow you in there. And I applauded him, but I had a lot of friends around me that thought I was a nutcase, and you can't let these people do this stuff. And these bad guys need, it's like, ugh.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that looking back, we should absolutely applaud the people who fought against going into the wrong countries to fight wars against people we had really no business fighting. I mean, the war on terror, the war on drugs, you make the problem a big generalized problem.
Sure. Have you heard of PNAC?
PNAC?
Yeah. It's called Project for New. That's where I learned about it, and that's why I applauded Chrétien, because PNAC is a Project for New American Century is a website that was up. It was taken down, I think, in 2002 or whatever, something along. But it talks about, they had the thing called what people dubbed as the Peanut Doctrine, which basically outlines how the U.S. needs to go in the Middle East to take control of oil, not because the U.S. really needed the oil, it's because they needed to make sure other people didn't have the oil, like Russia and China. And it spells it out. You can look it up. The Peanut Doctrine. You could probably find it on the internet someplace. I have a copy on my computer someplace. But when I learned
China
about
has their
that,
own parallel version of that called the Belt and Road. So.
Okay. Well, the Peanut Doctrine has caught a lot of dry reading. I just basically found like headings. It's written by like Wolfowitz and Pearl and Cheney and Bush Jr., the other Bush, and all the players that you might think, all the neocons, and it was out there in public, right? And of course they took it all down eventually, but you can still find it on some of the archives, and I think you can easily find that actual document they called the Peanut Doctrine, which was like their flagship doctrine as what the U.S. should do.
Well, it's getting a little on the late side. I'm not going to end it quite yet, but I have a planned outro. But real quick, Bo,
land the plane.
Yeah. I got to land it like old Sully, right? Old Sully Sullenberger or whatever his name was. Right into the Delaware.
Yeah, he did a great job.
Oh, yeah, man. He's a hero. Bojangles, are you there? Real quick, I want to ask you a question, if you're there, since I don't think you've got an opportunity to be asked one. If not, I'm going to go into my spiel. So, all right. So, Matt Taibbi, I invoked him earlier. I invoked his quote. And I think like Dan said, I think if you're going to follow, I think it's good advice to follow a journalist. Obviously, check your sources, all that good stuff. But Matt Taibbi's really good, and I think he's one of the crown jewels of journalism. But he wrote a book. He wrote a book called Hate Incorporated. And what I was going to ask Bojangles, are you there?
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah. I was going to ask, it seems like a platitude nowadays that people say, oh, the media just wants us to fight. The media just wants us to hate each other so they can make their money at the top, or whatever conspiracy theory they have, or even, I mean, it doesn't have to be a conspiracy. So my question is, do you think that is most of the story, that the media really is just trying to make each side hate one another?
Ooh, that's pretty tough, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't like easy questions. So
yeah, no, that's a difficult one. I don't know if it's so much that they want us to hate each other. I think it's more of they are fomenting what they can to produce stories that are the most outrageous and will get the most views, so they can collect the most money. I don't know if they necessarily would want to push us to hate one another, just because that could end up ruining the infrastructure that they have in place to collect said money. I mean, if everybody's engaging in armed conflict, then money's essentially worthless at that point. They've kind of shot themselves in the foot, so to speak. So I don't know if hate would be the word I would want to use for that.
Right. Fair enough. That makes sense. Well, I'm going to go down that route anyways. This is from Matt Taibbi's book, Hate Incorporated, and he had 10 rules. He wrote 10 rules, and they kind of are in sequential order, so just follow along with me. Number one, it's like steps, if you will. Number one, there are only two baskets of ideas: Republican and Democrat, liberal and conservative, left or right. It's pure binary thinking, white or black, 1 or 0. And this is encoded from a young age, right? And it's a fallacy. It's the black and white fallacy. It's the either or fallacy, right? So we're already starting off on bad ground. 2, the ideas are in permanent conflict. A lot of what is talked about doesn't affect our daily lives. So a lot of people will get, I mean, this conversation is a perfect example of that, right? Like the fact that CNN or maybe Fox News, lied about some things, or what Sanjay Gupta's opinion on ivermectin. Like, a lot of the shit we talk about has nothing to do with our everyday lives. And in the meantime, we might need to actually pass a healthcare bill or actually address the problem that a lot of people don't have more than $400 in their bank account. But that's for another time. That's policy. So 2, the ideas are always in permanent conflict. You got the binary thinking, and then you put those into conflict. 3, the media tells you to hate people and not institutions. They tell you to hate the person with the bad ideas, not the idea itself. The anger against one side compensates for the faults of the other candidate. Biden, i.e., Biden's biggest strength is that he is not Trump. This goes into number 4. Everything is someone else's fault, right? So, this is just classic scapegoating, right? And to me, any sign of scapegoating is an immediate red flag, and probably one of the biggest red flags towards any misinformation, disinformation, ungenuine thinking. Now, there are actual bad guys in the world, but those are few and far between from, I think, what the media makes us believe, right? So, an example, you're losing your jobs because of the Democrats' open border policy, where they allow illegal immigrants to steal your jobs. Now, is there a little bit of truth in that? I'm sure, but I think it's a kernel, and they've blown it into a piece of popcorn, right, or a whole bag. But anyways, bad things happen, and it could be blamed on the other party. And then there's a flow chart. If we can blame it on the other party, then yes, we report the story. If no, we can't blame it on the other party, then no, we don't report the story, right? So number 5, nothing is everyone's fault. Quote, this is from the book, quote, if both parties have an equal or near equal hand in causing a social problem, we typically don't cover it. Or better to say, a reporter or two might cover it, but it's never picked up. It doesn't take over a news cycle, doesn't become a thing. AKA bad news travels fast. What's the Mark Twain quote? A lie can travel around the world before the truth even puts its shoes on. It's kind of that thing, right? So that goes into number 6, root, don't think. Quote, this is from the book, quote, by the early 2000s, TV stations learned to cover news like sporting events. The election cycle was reconfigured into a sports coverage saga. It was perfect. 18 months of scheduled contests. It was perfect. 18 months of scheduled contests, a preseason, which were straw polls or polls, then a regular season, which is primaries, and playoffs, which can be seen as the general election. Then you go to number 7. There's no switching teams allowed. The concept of balance, which used to be seen as a virtue, has been twisted all the way around to mean a taboo trade practice, a form of dishonesty. Roger Ailes at Fox started this. He made the whole concept of balance an inside joke on right-wing media. It's the reason why the preposterous slogan fair and balanced was so effective, both for recruiting conservatives and infuriating liberals. Ailes used to say, quote, the news is like a ship. If you take your hands off the wheel, it pulls hard to the left. Translation, you need to pull harder the other way to achieve, quote, balance overall. 8. The other side is literally Hitler. Quote, shortly after 9/11, Fox began a long streak atop the cable's ratings. Beginning in the first quarter of 2002, the company would stay at number one for over 15 years straight. A crucial part of its success was its reaction to 9/11. Post-attack America was scared and needed someone to blame. Fox and its minions were more than happy to comply. They began using language about liberals that was extreme, even by their standards. Their fellow Americans weren't just lily-livered suck-ups who pretended to be enlightened. They were actively in league with Al-Qaeda. They're not just wrong, they're evil. 9. In the fight against Hitler, everything is permitted. Just go and look up the firebombing at Dresden for an illustration of this principle, right? And then this brings us to number 10, feel superior. Trump calling people low IQ and losers, and Hillary Clinton's comment about the basket of deplorables comment. and every second of liberal talk show hosts demeaning the intelligence and moral compass of anyone that could even possibly consider voting for Trump. This part needs no explanation. It's designed to fuel hate. It's designed to make people feel superior. And it's driving a wedge between us. And, you know, I mean, I think there's a time and place for sunshine and rainbows. Let's all come together, comments. And I don't know, maybe this is that time and place. But I'll let y'all determine that. I appreciate everybody for allowing me to do the show. Thanks for everybody's participation. Thank you, Pangburn, for my slot, and we'll jump down to the tavern.
Thank you.
Great show, ZMO.
Thank you, Doolittle.
Keep it up.
Thank you, sir.